Warhammer 40k Armageddon is here, and while we are all building, painting and playing with our brand new Space Marine and Orcs, I'm up to something a little bit different. I'm on a mission set over 30 years in the past to paint every loyalist Space Marine with some vintage plastic. Of the 9 main loyalist chapters, I have already painted this edition's new poster boys, the Blood Angels. So for this episode, let's paint up everyone's favourite blueberries, the 13th Legion, the Ultramarines. So diving into my classic Armageddon 2nd edition box, before I get any paint on this old marine, let's get them based first. I'm using the Kraut cover, A Tale of Grimdark, on a layer of PVA basing glue. I'm adding a layer of watered down PVA glue just over the top of it and the bigger rocks. This will help keep them in place so it doesn't go flying off when we come to paint it. Once it's dry, either leave it for a while or blast it with a hairdryer to speed things up. It's time to prime it, which I'm going to use my all-time favourite, which is Matte Black by the Colour Forge. The aim of this series is not only to paint all 9 main legions of Loyalist Space Marines, but I also want to use some new techniques and not just the classic heavy metal style. Along with that, I'm going to be using some brand new paints that I've never used before. For this scheme, I'm going to be using the 2 Thin Coats paints by the Duncan Rhodes Painting Academy. God Emperor Duncan Rhodes, may my paints be thin and my edges be crispy. Daddy Duncan ain't the only deity that we're praying to today, because we are going to use the world famous, the world loved makeup egg. Thinner paints as normal, and then load up our egg with the paint. I like to dab off the excess on a glove here, because if you use a paper towel, it will remove some of the moisture from the egg and it will give you a kind of chalky appearance when we actually start to put paint on the mini. Our first colour that we're going to use is marine blue, and we're going to want to cover all of the power armour with this. The good thing about the makeup egg here is that it's not going to go into the deepest, darkest recesses, so it will keep them nice and dark without having to use a wash. As good as those big makeup sponges are for getting paint on the mini, they can be quite hard to get into some of those more like tight areas. But luckily, they usually do come in a multi-pack, so just grab your smaller ones, you'll be able to get in the inside of the legs, all into the arms, all that good stuff. And for any areas you really can't get to, just touch them up with a paintbrush. After you're happy with the coverage, we're going to step onto mid-tone and the bright highlights. I'm going to go in first with Elysium Blue, and I'm going to cover maybe about 70% of what I've already covered with the Marine Blue. Just imagine where the light would be hitting the marine. And one other thing that's really important is actually pressure in which you're actually dabbing your sponge. You can kind of create these really nice gradients of colour from the dark to the light if you just kind of go a little bit softer and where you want the transitions to be. And if you go too heavy with it, it's really easy for you to just go back to your original dark blue and just cover up any bits. A final highlight, we're going to use Celestial Blue here, and what we want to do is just focus on the brightest areas of our highlights here. Top of the shoulders, top of the knees, top of the head if you're going to make that blue, which I'm going to make a decision about that just in a moment. You don't need to go too mad with this, just little bits here and there can really make a big impact. What you can actually do is, if you're doing this on more of a modern marine, you can actually use this to give yourself some kind of softer edge highlights. Now I'm really happy with this, a really good gradient of colour without having to use an airbrush. There are tons of creators who have already talked about makeup sponges here, but I think they may be one of my favourite hobby tools. They're nice and cheap and they're easy to use, and you get a great result. What is there to complain about? Now that the marine blue, or blue,
I don't know. Blue?
now that that's done, let's move on to all the other parts. I'm going to focus on all the leather details, the pouches, the holsters, and for that I'm going to start off with Noir Brown, which is part of the Dark Art set from 2 Thin Coats. Next step, grab a nice sharp brush and I'm going to use Noble Steed Brown, and I'm going to do some nice scratchy highlights across all of the leather to give it that really nice distressed look. You don't need to be too neat with this, and that's one of my favourite things about it, is that it gives a really good effect without a lot of precision. To push this a little bit further as well, I just mix in a little bit of white with a Noble Steed Brown and then just add just a couple of extra little scratches here and there. Now about halfway through painting the power armour, I decided to paint this Ultramarines helmet red. Now not only does that denote him as a sergeant, but there's actually a really cool lore implication with it. While I was listening to the book Know No Fear, which is one of the Heresy novels, there is a character in that called Sergeant Thiel. He's in a little bit of trouble because he actually brought ahead a little bit of a plan to basically train all the Space Marines in combat against fellow Astartes, which of course at the time was deemed big heresy. But during the events of Know No Fear, when the word bearers were coming down hard on the Ultramarines in Calth, Sergeant Thiel was a key character for them to kind of turn it around and make sure that things weren't as bad as they could have been. So to honour that battle brother, from there on out, all the Ultramarine sergeants would have a red helm. The really cool bit was like Gilliman was saying like, make sure the sergeants have got red helmets so we can see them in the mess of this right now. I start with Berserker Red, give me a nice base coat to work with. I also do this over the bolter casing as well, because what says like 2nd edition Marines more than that classic red bolter casing? We're then going to go in with Sanguine Scarlet, leaving the Berserker Red in the deepest recesses, just allowing us to get more vibrancy with the colour. And then finally going in with Demon Red for just a few select places as well as some edge highlights. Now the classic Ultramarines of this era used yellow for their shoulder trim and chest aquila, but because we're doing this in more of a modern scheme, I'm going to use some really nice gold metallics for this. Now a little trick I like to use instead of doing several layers of gold paint on it is actually go in with a brown. I'm using the Noble Steed brown that I've already got on my palette. This will act as a really good undercoat for that gold and just allow it to be nice and vibrant when we actually come to paint it on. For the gold I'm using Dragon's Gold from Tooth and Coats of course, and oh look at that, it's going on oh so smooth, oh so bright, oh so shiny. You may still need a couple of coats in certain places, but just use your best judgment, and as Daddy Duncan says, just make sure your paints are nice and thin. After we've sorted all our gold details, I'm going to go in with a little bit of a Battle Mud wash. This will create some deeper tones in the recesses of the gold. While we're on the metallics train right now as well, let's colour all the silver in. I'm going to use Dwarven Iron for this. God, that was really hard for me to say with my Scottish accent. Not to forget about the bolter as well, which we are doing in a sub-assembly. And this was the moment that I realised I forgot to drill the barrel. You win some, you lose some, folks. At this point, I want to highlight some of the gold, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix some of our original base coat of Dragon's Gold with our brightest silver highlight, which is going to be Mithril Blade. This will start to bring that shine back to the gold, especially after the wash that we applied. Now before highlighting the silver, I actually want to try out a little bit of an experiment here. I watered down some of the black ink that comes in the Dark Arts Tooth and Coat set, and I mean like really watered it down. I just wanted to see how this acts as a wash. Now once that's dry, let's go in with straight Mithril Blade and highlight all the silver parts, as well as just doing selective little parts on the gold to really give it that shine. To do the gem in the middle of the chest as well, we're just going to use the same red recipe we used for the bolter and the helmet. The next step is the eye lenses, and of course with this being a red helmet here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do green eye lenses just to make them stand out that little bit better. I'm using some undiluted white ink from the Dark Arts set, and just be careful when you're doing this, you don't want to ruin any of the nice red on the helmet. Once that is dried, I'm going to grab some ethereal green and then mix it with the Tooth and Coat's Spirit Medium, and then just flood that into the eyes, because what that'll do is it'll give it like almost a bit of a glow effect to it, because the white will still shine a little bit through. It's time to stick the hands and bolter onto our old monopose marine here. I'm using just a little bit of super glue just to make sure that it sticks on and it doesn't fall off in the future. It covers up all our hard work, but hey, at least we know that it's painted. I want to add a couple of edge highlights to key points of the armour as well. We're not talking a 3-stage heavy metal with a dot highlight at the end here. We're just going to use celestial blue here just to highlight a couple of those key armour pieces. Grab your sharpest brush and let it do the work on some of those edges. Because we've got this really nice gradient of colour on the armour, there's no real need for all these like intricate levels of edge highlights, so just one will do it. Now the 2nd edition Marine is a little bit smaller, so newer transfers might look a little bit dumb on those small shoulder pads. So luckily I've got this older transfer sheet here that will fit perfectly. Now what I found though is that they've got a lot of additional plastic on the sides of them. The newer ones are way better. So what I do is I just make a couple of cuts here and there on the older transfers. This will help it conform to the shape of the shoulder just a little bit easier. And if you end up cutting away a little bit too much, it doesn't matter, because these transfers aren't going to be clean when we're finished with this guy. Using the classic combination of microsol and micro set, we're going to place these transfers where we need them and then move them around with our hobby knife to get them in the perfect location. Once we're happy with that, just start pressing them in quite gently with a Q-tip here. And once we're happy with it, just go over with a few layers of microsol and just repeat that until it loses its shine. At this point, I really wanted to give them a little bit of that extra old hammer drip, so I decided to freehand some checkers on one of the knees. Using White Star and a particularly steady hand, I did the outline of just a basic kind of choppy checker pattern on it. I'm not going for anything particular here, I just want to give them a little extra flair. Then using White Star, I'm just going to fill in just the spots that I want to be the white squares. Now if you did notice there was some chunks taken out of the decals, this will all make sense now because we're going to add some battle damage to our Space Marine. Using our brightest highlight of blue, which is Celestial Blue for this, I'm going to just add a couple of random scratches and X's all across the armour. After all, this guy has been fighting on Armageddon for a while against the greenskins, and there's no way that his armor is going to be nice and clean. Be sure to reinforce this on the decals as well, just by drawing a couple of lines and a couple of dots. To reinforce some of these scratches to make them look a little bit deeper, go in with some black paint. I'm using Doom Death Black, and just draw a small black line beside some of them. This will really accent them and make them look super deep and super scarred. Not forgetting about the bolter and the helmet as well. Go in with your brightest red and do exactly the same thing. But for the bolter, what I like to do is actually add a couple of silver streaks here and there, just to make it obviously look like it is going right through to the bare metal. Let's finish up our Armageddon Ultramarine here by doing the base. What I'm going to start with is a watered down Xandri dust from Citadel, just to cover the entire rocks and the entire base. Once that is dried, go back in with Battle Mud Wash, and we're just going to put this all over the base again. And then once that's dry, let's go back in with a dry brush of Ushabti Bone just to catch all those highest points. And then finally, for the part that everybody waits for, we just need to paint the rim of the base. I've chosen to go for black for this, but you can do whatever you want. And then with that, our Ultramarine 2nd Edition Marine is completed, ready to join his Blood Angels brethren on the battlefields of Armageddon. It's funny how these little bits of plastic hold so much nostalgia in them, and especially with the 11th edition going back to Armageddon, and of course that artwork being so reminiscent of that classic John Blanche piece. I think we're all being hit by that nostalgia bug in some way or another. But with 2 out of the 9 loyalist legions done, why don't you let me know in the comments below which one you would like me to tackle next. While you're down there, you can check out all my links in my description. I live stream on Twitch. There's also some hobby affiliates in there where you can save yourself some money on all those new armies that you're going to try in 11th edition. But until next time, I've been Kieran, also known as Stacked Overdrive Painting. Have a great day. See you in the next one.